Hello, this is Makeda of the Boston Bidoofs, and we recently just finished our Season 4 draft for the SCL. So this is going to be my analysis of my draft, why I drafted what I did, and I did a little something interesting this time, in which I drafted backwards. So what that means is, as a challenge to myself, instead of going for the strong things first, I actually went for the weaker options and saw if I could build a team with what was left out of the tier list. And honestly, I think I made a pretty disgusting team. But I guess that's kind of due to the fact that there's so many things that are back out again in the new DLC that I was left with a lot of options, and I did my best to make those options work for me. So let's go to this Showdown tab, and let me show you what I drafted. So my first pick was actually Lickitung. And the reason I picked Lickitung, and I was excited to pick Lickitung, is because, one, it is a normal type, and I really have a hard time finding a good normal type. And it has so much like diverse utility as well as being bulky that I felt like it would be really fun to use. So you can see this is just a example set, but it gets knockoff, toxic, heal bell, wish. It gets seismic toss. It gets Power Whip, Earthquake, a bunch of good physical attacking moves. It has an insane bulk, and I feel like just the utility that it provides me is going to be fantastic. So I picked it first. I was pick 11, so it wasn't like it was the first pick in the whole draft, but it was I'm happy to pick this, and I think because people struggled so hard last season with destroying my Porygon 2, I felt like having something that played a similar role but could beat Porygon would kind of be nice. So because Lickitung gets knockoff, toxic, heal bell, it can completely destroy Porygon in a 1v1, which is nice because someone did pick up Porygon as their first pick. And I don't blame them because it seems like people in this league don't exactly know how to deal with bulky Pokemon like Porygon 2. So I went with Lickitung. I played a couple games with it, like practice-wise, and it's honestly a lot better than you would expect. So I'm excited to try him out, see if I can get any good plays with him this season. So my second pick was my Vileplume, was my tier 4. I picked Vileplume because, one, I always have a hard time picking a grass type. And when I draft, I try not to draft things that I've already used in previous draft leagues seasons. And so it really narrows down my options. Like, I couldn't pick Venusaur. I practiced with Roserade, but I didn't like how good Roserade was for being a tier 3, so I didn't want to draft it. And I just felt Vileplume is very underrated, very bulky. Effect Spore is a fun ability. It also has Strength Sap, which is a very, very good move, as well as Sleep Powder. So it has a lot of utility. It has great stab moves and Energy Ball, Sludge Wave. If I play against a Sun, I can use Chlorophyll, although its base speed is 50, so it probably won't benefit too much. But it also gets Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, Aromatherapy, you know, all that good stuff. Synthesis, and another Toxic user, which is less rare than it was in previous drafts because they've released like transfer mods, but it's still very nice. My next pick was Mienshao, and the reason I picked Mienshao is because I could tell with how the draft was turning out that my team was going to be very, very slow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't really want to run Trick Room. So what I decided to do is I was going to draft something fast, like Mienshao, over base 100 speed, to kind of mitigate my speed. Because if you're looking at your team in a draft league, like, let me go back to this one. If you're looking at a team, let's pick a random team so I don't spoil my team for you. You can see at the bottom it averages all of your speeds, and you want your speed to be like, I would say around 80, base 80 speed, because that's a good speed tier. But you don't want everything to be that fast, because for example, like if you look at his Lapras here, base 60 speed on a very bulky Pokemon is very good, but on like offensive Pokemon, those are the ones that are going to be the opposite with the really high speed, like the Raikou. So what you want is something fast and offensive, and a bunch of slow defensive mons. So you can see my first two picks, Lickitung, Vileplume, very bulky, very slow. So I had to mitigate that with Mienshao. I like Mienshao because it has Regenerator. It's a good Scarf user or a Band user. Lets me pivot. It has knockoff. That's another thing. I have a lot of knockoff users this season, which is great. And I feel like the fighting stab is going to be very useful against some of the other things people have drafted. As well as mitigating some of the defenses. Like if you see my next pick, it's weak to dark. So the fighting is going to be very helpful. Stuff like that. Like you'll see. I had to plan ahead on things I didn't think were going to be picked or like other options. But I pretty much got everything that I wanted again. So that's another good thing about this season is I was able to make a good team with things that I was anticipating on using anyway by drafting backwards. So that was pretty cool. Next up, my fourth pick was Chandelure. And I picked Chandelure because one, I'm not a fan of a lot of the fire types in this in Pokemon. I feel like a lot of them are overrated or not strong enough to like warrant being used. Like for example, like Arcanine's decent, but it's not the best. I like having that secondary typing. So I picked Chandelure because one, it's a tier 3 and I wanted to pick up a fire type before they were taken. And two, it gives me flash fire and it hits really hard, and it's got the 80 speed tier that I was talking about, like the average speed tier that you're gonna want. So I feel like he'd make a good choice specs or choice scarf user. It gets trick, so I can give someone else those choice items if I need to, and his stab combination is very powerful. So I feel like if I can mitigate most of the things that resist fire and ghost, Chandelure is gonna be able to go in there and hit everything hard. Even neutrally, it's going to do a lot of damage because it has base 145 special attack. So that was why I picked Chandelure. If I'm feeling frisky, it has Flame Body. I really like Flame Body as an ability because Burn is obviously one of the most powerful statuses to inflict. So maybe I can pull something with like a bulky Chandelure set. That'd be kind of funny. But obviously he's mostly offensive. But I mean, hey, look at his defenses. They're not bad. That 60 HP is what's holding him back, really. So that's why I picked Chandelure. Good fire type, gives me a ghost type, and yeah, it's just fantastic mon. Next up is my Mamoswine, another base 80 speed, but what it provides me is a strong physical attacker with priority and a ground type. So I felt like because of the new DLC releasing so many of the pseudo legendaries and the dragon types, an ice type would be essential. So what better ice type than Mamoswine? Priority Ice Shard is going to do killer damage against something like Zygarde, Salamence, even the Lotties, anything like that. So I decided to go with Mamoswine because one, I still needed a ground type, and I feel like ground is probably the most vital type to utilize. And two, because it gives me that priority. And it's decent speed. 80 speed is not bad. It has good abilities. Thick Fat, it can even be immune to Intimidate with Oblivious. And it gets Stone Edge as a good alternate stab for the Edge Quick combo. So I like Mamoswine. I've been wanting to use it for a while, but I couldn't fit it onto any team. So I thought, what better time than now to fit it onto my team? Next up is Milotic. This was going to be between two things. I had Milotic queued up first, but it could also have been a Starmie because one, as you can see, most of my team is slow. So Starmie would have given me that speed. But it would also give me another Psychic type because if I got Milotic, I had my next pick planned out, as you can see up there. So I picked Milotic because one, it's another pivot to go with Mienshao. It gets Flip Turn. Even though it's a special attacker, it's still good. It gives me good bulk again, a good bulky water type with Ice Beam for those dragons that I was talking about, as well as Recover and Haze, which are great. So I just really like Milotic as a Pokemon. It has two great abilities. If I wanted to run offensive, I could run competitive. Like if someone has Sticky Webs up, competitive makes this thing a monster. And Marvel Scale is just great against something that wants to put a status on my team. So I went with Milotic. I'm excited to use it. I can always switch out for Starmie if I decide to change my mind, because Starmie did not get picked, which is nice. And I don't have a Rapid Spinner, so I might have to go to that eventually, but we'll see how this works out, because I like my team fits more bulky style right now, so I felt like Milotic was the better first option. Next up was my Metagross. I drafted Metagross because, one, I needed a Steel type, two, I didn't have a Psychic type yet, And 3, I just really like Metagross. Gives me another priority user. It gets Bullet Punch. It has great coverage. Psychic is great to go with my Lickitung, because it deals with the fighting types. I mean neutrally, but still. It can take hits pretty well with its stats. I like Clear Body, so it can, if it wants to set up, it can't get its stats lowered. I just think Metagross is a cool Pokemon, so I wanted to try it out. I haven't used it in a couple years because it's been a few generations since I've really played competitive, and it wasn't in the initial DLCs, so I wanted to try it out. He's my boy. I really like him. And then my next up was my tier 1 is Dragonite. So I was excited for Dragonite for multiple reasons, mostly because 1, it's bulky and it's fast. Multi-scale makes it great, and with heavy-duty boots this season, or this generation, it's not going to have to worry about switching into hazards and getting that multi-scale broken. So I think that's really great. It gets Defog, it's my only hazard remover on my team, which I kind of might need to look up. It gets Extreme Speed, Dragon Dance, Dual Wing Beat now, Dragon Stabs, it gets Fire Punch, it gets Ice Punch, Iron Head, Rock Slide, Stone Edge, Superpower. It gets great physical coverage, and it's just a monster with all this bulk. It's just disgusting. So I'm really hoping after Dragon Dance, it could probably deal with most of the teams that don't have like an Ice Shard or something. And even if they do, if I can switch it in and Dragon Dance on a switch, Dragonite's a monster. Like, it's gonna destroy everything. So I'm excited to use it. It is not like my favorite tier 1, but I felt like it fit my team really well. It provides me with a good sweeper that's bulky and decently fast. So I felt like Dragonite was my best option there. And then you'll go to my next Pokemon, which is Jolteon. This was another pick I made just to mitigate my lack of speed. I feel like I needed an electric type because electric's a very strong type, even with the prominence of ground types there. With base 130 speed. So I needed that extra speed because if I didn't grab that, then like most of my team would be under 80 speed, so, or 80 or less speed. My second highest was my Mienshao at 105, so I wanted something else, and Jolteon was definitely the best option because 1, I have a lot of physical attackers, and 2, it's just like, it provides me a lot of extra utility, and it's also a pivot with Volt Switch. It has Heal Bell if I wanted another Cleric. That puts me at 4, I believe. I think Dragonite gets Heal Bell too. And I don't know, I just felt like it did well in other seasons. The only thing that it's lacking is good coverage. As you can see, those are the best coverage moves it has right there. Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Shadow Ball, Hyper Voice. It also gets Baton Pass if I want to do a different type of pivot, and it also is another Wish user, so it gives me that option as well as a fast electric type. But really it's just there because I have a lot of physical attackers and needed something fast, so I felt like Jolteon was a great fit. And Crustle, my second to last pick, is here because 1, I just needed a filler and it didn't have any overlapping types with my other Pokemon, and it's a Stealth Rock user. I mean, I have Metagross and Mamoswine, but those are very offensive Pokemon, and I feel like I could get away with not using Stealth Rocks. So having something that could dedicated set it up is great. Plus, it has interesting abilities. Wink Armor makes it very fast. Like, not very fast, but decently fast after it takes a hit. Or if I alternatively want to use a different item, I could use Sturdy and give it its own Focus Sash, but it invisibility. So that's kind of cool. It has Spikes and Stealth Rocks, which gives me a secondary status, or a hazard, instead of Stealth Rocks. And Edgequake is just a very strong offensive combo, so another Edgequake combo user is great. And last but not least, I actually chose G-Max Grimmsnarl. As you can see, my team lacks a Fairy. And that is problematic because Fairy is probably one of the best types in the game, maybe next to Water and Steel. Like, it's a very great type. So the fact that it took me this long to pick a Fairy is kind of concerning, but I planned it around it because everybody had their G-Max picked about halfway through. So I wanted Grimmsnarl. It was between Grimmsnarl and Hatterene, and I felt like I just needed speed. And while Grimmsnarl is not fast, it has Prankster, which basically makes up for it. Also gives me a good way to set up screens. It gets Thunderwave. It gets Nasty Plot. It has good physical and special coverage. So I just really liked Grimmsnarl as my fairy type to go along with my Dragonite and my Metagross for that core there. So overall, I think my team looks pretty disgusting. Like if you want to look at it like this, my team looks pretty gross. If you look at the average stats, my highest stats are my attack and my special attack, which is surprising to me because of how bulky I drafted my team. But yeah, I'm excited for this season. I feel like I've drafted a very strong team with the handicap that I gave myself in drafting backwards. But I think I'm going to make it work because clearly it wasn't that much of a handicap if my team looks this disgusting. So we'll see how well I do. And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy this season.